when you think about it, you're really not paying that much attention to what other people are doing because, I mean, we're all, you know, this is such a cliche, but we're all the main characters in our own lives. So it's like everything else that's going on is sort of just background noise. And that's sort of how a lot of other people are going through their lives too.
Hello friends, I hope you're doing well. Today I get the chance to sit down with writer, artist, and around amazing person, Hannah. I first met Hannah at PF Chang's, where we both worked our way up from back waiters to servers, and here we are 3 years later, a lot more wise and holding an endearing sore spot for the place our friendship started. So Hannah, why don't you start by telling me a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm Hannah. Right now I work from home as a data manager, but in my spare time, I love being outside and I like taking photos, writing about feelings mostly, and just taking advantage of what the world has to offer. Although not right now, but.
Taking advantage of what the world has to offer from inside.
Yes, right now, for indefinitely, but
yeah.
Are we all?
So when I started the series is always all about personal transformation, encouragement, and empowerment. And I instantly thought of you because of your blog, Rootlessly, where you dive into really all of that from a self, perspective, introspective perspective. That's a lot of perspectives. But I was reading through your blog last night as I was preparing for this interview, and I really liked what you wrote in January's post. It was, I think it was like the forward blog post. Mm-hmm. And you wrote that you're writing about fears. And so I thought that it would be a really great use of this space, especially since we're in this time where a lot of people are experiencing a lot of fear. Mm-hmm. I was reflecting on COVID and what everyone's reactions are. And it's grief, and from grief comes fear and anger and, just dissociating and depression and all of that. And, I think that you have a lot to say on the matter. I think you've done a lot of thinking on the matter and a lot of, talking on the matter. And what I really liked was when you wrote, my biggest fear used to be that nothing I ever did would be good enough for the people around me. I was terrified to let people in, terrified that people would see my ugly or imperfect side and hate me for it. I overcame that fear by letting people in anyways. But a sneak peek for anyone who wants to read this afterwards is then you went and you flipped it and you said, now you realize that your biggest fear is that nothing I ever do will be good enough for myself. And that is a pretty powerful statement. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that journey? Because I think there's a lot of people who are stuck in that I'm afraid of what people will think, to then flipping it and being like, no, I'm worth enough that I'm more afraid that I won't live up to my own expectations.
Yeah, so I know that, part of that journey was having to overcome, because I definitely have very high expectations of myself, as most of us do. Most of us do have higher expectations of ourselves than we do of other people. So after a lot of reflecting, I thought about how when I see people doing cool stuff, I'm not looking at, the little mistakes or I'm not, what's the word? I guess I'm not honing in on the tiny details of what everybody does when they do things, because I have my own life to worry about. So once I realized, oh, I'm not alone in this. Other people are more focused on their own lives than they are on what mistakes I'm making. It was sort of this liberating feeling of oh, okay, so I'm not being, put under a microscope probably by most people. And if I am, they obviously have nothing better to do with their time.
But cut off when you said you're not under a microscope from most people.
Yeah. So once I sort of realized that, for the most part, of course, there's the exceptions of people who, need to, nitpick to feel okay with themselves, which is more of a reflection of themselves than me. I realized, wow, for the most part, people don't really care what mistakes I'm making. So unless it's directly, impacting or hurting them. So it was definitely a big shift, and noticing that a lot of that fear came from my own over criticism of myself, thinking that, oh, because I'm hyper aware of every mistake I made, that must mean that everybody else is too, when that's not really the case. So, and I know that, I grew up with a lot of, really high achieving people. So I was like around seeing all that, and it's like, wow, I have to be like that. And then sort of coming to realize that, no, I don't. I don't have to do that. I can do whatever I want. I got one life. So, yeah.
That's awesome. I think that's a really, wise perspective, and it takes a lot to come to that conclusion, because it's really hard to not. I get stuck in that all the time. Like, oh, my hair's sticking up. People are probably noticing that my hair is going like this, or, oh, I said the wrong word. I'm sure everyone's focusing on that. Or, I hope I didn't hurt someone's feelings when I said this. It's hard to get out of that mindset, I guess.
Yeah, it really is, because I guess, if I'm noticing these things, everybody else must be. When you sort of flip the script and you're like, oh, well, when you think about it, you're really not paying that much attention to what other people are doing, because, we're all, this is such a cliche, but we're all the main characters in our own lives. So it's like everything else that's going on is sort of just background noise. And that's sort of how a lot of other people are going through their lives too. So it's almost like, it's kind of relieving, and it's also this like really nice form of solidarity, because we're all trying to like figure out how to live and be okay with it. So
it's true. I almost feel like that's more of a reality in everyone's mind since the COVID outbreak, because there's, I feel in society there's a lot of like, you put success as like the highest form, and what does success look like? Success looks like the best job, the most essential job. It looks like, put together makeup and hair all the time, or like you drive the best car, or for some people success is not that, but I feel like a lot of culture is shifting to what does it look like to be successful in COVID. Like I think it is to have friends, and to talk to one person that's not your dog, or to have a dog.
Yeah.
Or to, like, some days my success is I got up and I put jeans on and I was not leaving the house.
Yeah, for sure. And also it's like there's also being in such a, like, everything's day by day right now, so not even knowing what the world is going to look like, a month from now, 6 months from now, it's like kind of paralyzing a little bit, because it's like, well, how am I supposed to plan for anything, or how am I supposed to move forward when I don't even know what the world's going to look like? And it's also like, is my life going to be the same in 6 months? Is somebody I know going to get COVID and not make it? And it's just like, it's just so scary to have to live in this reality and try to figure out how to live and do the things you're supposed to do every day without, being weighed down by that fear all the time. But kind of like puts into perspective what's important at the end of the day, like what is the most important. And it's sort of this big defining moment of like, oh, so this is what really matters. But it's definitely been, I know for me, it's been a wild journey trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about that journey? Like, share as much as you feel comfortable sharing, but what has that journey looked like for you?
Sure. Yeah. There's definitely, so it kind of started where I was realizing, because my dad is, has a lot of comorbidities. So, and he's in New York, but he's upstate, so hopefully it won't be so bad. But he smokes, and he's, pushing 60. So I'm like, it's, I'm like, well, I haven't seen him since August. So I'm like, well, this is terrifying. And then that, takes you to the, well, I'm gonna die someday. Like, I was just like, which we all know, but nobody wants to talk about it. And then I was like, totally I like lost it for 4 days, and I was like anxious all the time. And I had to think, and when you're sitting there thinking about that, and it's hard in a time like this because you can't, usually when you think about that, and we all think about it sometimes, you go and you do like a life-giving activity, something that makes you feel like life is worth living, or life is, what it's about, I guess. And right now we can't really do that because at least here everything's closed. You can't go on a trail, you can't, unless you're trying to trespass, but
not recommended by Avanti, don't trespass.
No, would not. You could they're fining people now apparently, but
and I think there's prison time too.
Yeah. But yeah, so having to like really sit with those thoughts I wouldn't recommend it, but it was really rough. And then it got me thinking, I was like, well, okay, assuming that I make it through all of this in one piece, in order to feel like what I'm doing every day has meaning, what do I need to accomplish, really? What is the most important to me? What have I been doing that is not useful in terms of making a meaningful life, whatever that means to me or whoever? And how do I change my life to be more like what I envision it to be and what would bring meaning to me? And when you're sitting there thinking about like, oh, well, I'm not going to be alive forever, you can't escape that. And you have to, it's such a clarifier, like it's just crystal clear, like this is what's important to me. And I think about all the things that I've always put off, and you think you have time, you think that we put all the best things off for like some mystical someday in the future, when all of a sudden we're realizing, oh no, we might not have that. So it's definitely been eventful, would be a good term for that. And at this point, I feel like I'm definitely a lot more comfortable with that idea. I mean, as comfortable as anybody can be, but at least like knowing that after this, I hope, or I don't even want to hope because, hope is not action. I intend to create a life that's more in line with what I value and not do things that aren't serving that for me.
Yeah. First, thank you for sharing that perspective. And second, I can relate to that too. I think I have spent a lot of time thinking about my impending doom as well. And it is very clarifying, and as an artist myself, I've thought about, okay, so I created art, my last project, like not client work, but my last actual project was in 2017 and it's now 2020. And I spent the last 3 years tucking away like little like inspirations, like, oh, I'll get to that when I have time. Oh, I'll spend more time with my family when I have time. Oh, please, can I just get a life pause so I have some time? And here we are in this life pause, and I'm like, okay, now what? Like I asked.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely rough. And I feel like there's probably so many more of us going through the same thing too right now. And just, it's like this unifying moment. It's kind of wild.
It's super wild. At Avanti actually means to move forward, which is really interesting. And I think, isn't that cool? I like the word. It's an Italian word, which I didn't know when I started working here. I love Italy, for anyone who doesn't know. So it like made it even, I was like, oh, it's Italian. you know, and it means to move forward. And you are actually, I worked with you and we were just becoming friends. I think when I came here for the first time, I got my septum pierced.
Yeah, I think I remember that.
I remember making a big stink about it because I kept sneezing and like touching my nose and going, oh no,
Yeah,
I got my
I
septum
remember that.
pierced. I felt so cool. But you know, what's been bringing into perspective for me during this time when the salons are closed and we can't do piercings and we can't, like a lot of the transformation processes that I've done to feel more like me are stripped away and they're not available right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious what advice you would give to someone who, you know, their bravery comes from modifying their own body, you know, from dyeing their hair or doing, you know, fancy makeup looks, you know, how you talk a lot about, you know, like on your Facebook page and, you know, on your blog, you talk a lot about, you know, pouring into other people and toxic positivity and things like that and how it's okay to just be you. And I was really curious, you know, when the masks are slipped away and the pieces and the tools are taken away to cosmetically look like you, how would you recommend nurturing your soul to feel like you?
I mean, I think it looks different for everybody because, I mean, we all have our own things that make us feel comfortable and safe. And I sort of been thinking about this time because I know, like, I have been out here looking like a potato for weeks. And it's almost, it really depends. It just depends on what each of us individually need. I know that this has definitely been a really interesting journey of learning how to love myself as I am without, you know, being able to, I want to cut my hair so bad. I really do. And I'm like refraining so hard and just like learning how to appreciate who you are on, you know, more of a soul level, I think. And being able to nurture yourself as you are in this moment is super important for getting through times like this. And I mean, you know, partaking in self-care in any way that works for you, whether it's, you know, a face mask or whatever else, or going for a run, or, you know, sitting outside, or whatever you need to, you know, make yourself feel good, because we're all in this really strange, traumatic moment, and we have to figure out how to care for ourselves through it, because that's how we're going to get through it. So
it's true. You know, I liked those posts that you shared because I think that it's very true. Like in the midst of this, you know, it's what you feel is okay, regardless of what that is. I look at my emotions in a day and I start out really happy in the morning. I have a panic attack around lunch and then I'm depressed until dinner and then I'm fine again.
Yeah.
You know? And I know I'm not the only one feeling that way.
Absolutely.
But I also know that's okay. And I think that wrestling with your identity is okay. And wrestling with yourself is okay. And I think that, you know, anyone who's listening to this, because I know, you know, our audience is obviously like the modified community, people with piercings or tattoos and things like that, all stripped away and all you're left with is you. It's okay to fall in love with yourself. And I think that's probably the most important thing that needs to be said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And especially when we're going through those more, you know, negative experiences, we shouldn't feel like we have to ignore them. We shouldn't feel like that it's, you know, wrong to feel that way because somebody might have it worse or anything like that. And a lot of, I know for me, and I think it's different for everybody, I tend to lean into feelings like that, sometimes to my own detriment, but going about that in a healthy way sometimes can help you see, you know, where feelings like that are coming from and why we're experiencing them, and can help, you know, pave the way for our own abilities to move forward and to be able to care for ourselves once we're on the other side of all of this. Because at the end of the day, we have to be able to do that anyway. And this is almost like a very, very intense crash course in how to nurture myself 101. So
yeah, I agree. There's a very like spiritual side to body modification and to piercing, and I think that if anything this time, because I know when the doors were like, we had to line out the door right before we shut down. And we were actually, I think we were the first shop in Portland to close our doors to the public, and it was just crazy how many people were pouring in. And I know it's going to be the same afterwards. So I almost want to encourage our listeners because I'm in all of the forums and I see everyone post like, what should I get pierced? And, what's your opinion of me? I almost want to like ask them like, what's your opinion of yourself? Like, what do you want to, when you're asking like, will this look good on me? Well, do you think it looks good on you? Because that's all that really matters, And I know you have your nose pierced. So before I let you go and enjoy your work day, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about that, because when I worked with you, you wore a very discreet little, I think it was a glass piece. Was it a glass piece in your nose?
So I've changed a lot. I definitely went for the just like regular old stud in the nose, kept it basic, but mostly I did that because I didn't know I could put anything else there. I didn't realize anything else would fit because it's so high up on my nose, but and with work, I didn't know that if it was, acceptable. I know that definitely part of my decision and even deciding to do that was definitely like rebellion because I was always the good kid. So I was like, all right. And I wanted to get a tattoo, but I was still living with my mom and she was like, no. And I was like, well, I'm going to pierce my nose then. And she's like, yeah, whatever, that's fine. And so that was sort of like, that was like the first thing I did that was, because I was in college. So I was, living independent of my parents. And I was like, all right. Like I was with them, during the summers. But when I was away, I was like, oh, how can I reclaim my independence? And it felt really like empowering to be able to just do that. And I don't know, I like felt like I was embracing my very soft, edgier self, very slight, but it was really empowering. So it was definitely good for my 18-year-old self to embark on that. But.
Yeah, I feel, well, traditionally it's a coming of an age piercing, your nostril piercing. And we've adopted it in Western culture, and I feel like it's very much the same. That was me. I was 16, and I remember calling my dad, because my mom was like all about it. She has her nose pierced, but my dad's like, I don't like jewelry on people's faces. And I remember calling him and being like, Dad, it's my body. Like, come on. And him being like, okay. And it was also like that empowering, like, I am a woman. I have my nose pierced. And I sat through that traumatic experience, which is not really traumatic. Yeah. But, at 16, I think I've built it up to be more of a big ordeal. But yeah, you have your septum pierced as well, don't you?
Yeah, that was that was not well received. Yeah, that's for sure. It was, I think, 2016, and it was after I graduated college, and I was just like, all right, what's the next step? And I hid it for a while because I was like, and then when I moved here, I decided, well, that's not my vibe right now. And then, so I kept it, hidden, and with work and everything like that, I didn't know. Because it's definitely on the East Coast, there's a really like wildly different culture with piercing than there is here. It's a lot more well received in like professional settings here than it is over there. Like I couldn't even, when I worked in an office job, I couldn't have even just a stud. I had to put like a clear stud in it because it wasn't acceptable at all. So it's definitely a wildly different culture. And once I started to feel more comfortable with myself here, I was like, all right, I'm going to embrace this again. So it's definitely different vibe. But when I was serving on the East Coast, I just like did it. And I was like, well, y'all got to get used to it. Sorry. But it was not, it was not well received, but it's my face, so.
It is your face. And I think you rock it. It looks really cute on you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And for anyone who doesn't know, your septum, that's what I like about the septum piercing is it's like the mullet of face piercings. You can keep it up for business and you can put it down for partying.
Oh yeah, yep.
Well, I guess on that note, I will let you enjoy the rest of your day.
All right.
But thank you so much for your time, Hannah. I enjoyed getting to see you first off. It's been a minute. And getting to hear your heart.
Well, thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share what's in the old noggin today.
All right. Well, I hope we talk soon. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.